In today's video, how much training experience should you have before you get on stage?
All by myself.
Hey guys, what's going on? This is Paul Ravella from ProPhysique.com, and today's video is going to be on the topic of how long should you be training before you decide to get on a bodybuilding stage. And before we get this video started, before we get too far along, I want to go ahead and get it out there. I don't think that you need that much training experience to get on stage. It all comes down to what your expectations are for the stage. And let's talk about what those expectations should look like. First question to ask yourself, have you ever been to a bodybuilding show? A lot of times people reach out to me and they go, I want to do a bodybuilding show. My first question, have you been to one? There are a lot of misconceptions about the stage, a lot of things that people assume but don't realize. And by attending the show, you get to clear the slate. You get to do a few great things. And one of the things you get to do is visualize what it takes to get on stage and what you're working for. Another thing you can do is get rid of some of the misconceptions you have. You see, a lot of us fear the stage because we think everyone looks like all the Instagram models and all the Mr. and Mrs. Olympias that we see, all the people that win all the big shows. That's our association with the stage, and naturally, because those people get the most attention and we see that stuff. What we don't see are the other 99.9% of the people that compete, because when you go to a show, you realize a few things. One, there are levels to competition. You don't just have to jump in and compete as a pro. They have first timers, they have novice, they have teen, they have masters divisions, they have open divisions, they have shows that are not national qualifiers to get you to nationals, they have shows that are national qualifiers, then they have national level shows, and if you win there, then you go to the pro shows. There's even a tier system in the pro shows, okay? Mr. Olympia, you don't just qualify for that. You have to win pro shows to get there, right? You have to get points. So this whole tier system is something I didn't realize until I actually went to a show. Attending my first show in 2007 led me to competing in my first show in 2008. 1 year later, the same show I attended, and it helped me with that visualization. So what I do wish is that I had attended a show much earlier in my life. I think my passion for the gym was already well embedded by the time I was in my mid-20s, right? Like, I was going to the gym every day, probably not making as much progress as I could because I was also, you know, having some fun with the boys on the weekend and doing, you know, living my life. But the one thing that I really enjoyed about competing, and this is the reason I think people should get into it earlier if they feel like it might be something they're interested in, it taught me a lot about being disciplined, about creating time management, about improving my way of life, because you have to kind of minimize the other things that are going on in your life if you have a fitness goal like that. And what I didn't realize was that fitness goal was going to impact my life as a whole. I ended up going back to school, getting degrees, meeting the woman of my dreams, getting married. Like, all these positive things came out of me taking control of my life, and deciding to compete in a bodybuilding show was probably the biggest step that I took in that direction. I did a lot of research before I did this, and so one area that often gets discussed, now this question came from an Instagram direct message, and I'll post it up here so you can see this person kind of asking, you know, my opinion on what I think they should do for timeline for getting on stage. Of course, the longer you have under your belt in the gym, the more muscle you're gonna have for getting on stage. However, I do feel like if you compete, you build the systems in place, you understand nutrition on a better level, you understand discipline, and you really find drive and motivation for getting into the gym. So if you compete earlier, you can still take time off after that show and then get on stage another year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later after you've made significant progress. But I feel like getting on stage the first time, I tell this to my clients all the time, the progress you make between your first and second show is probably the most progress you're ever going to make in your life, because now you're armed with all the knowledge, the experience, as well as the drive and motivation, because you've seen what you're doing. When you go to the gym, that next goal that you set, let's say you go and you do your novice class and you do well, and your next goal is to win an open class, every time you step foot in the gym, you're thinking about, I gotta win my open class. I remember how good those guys looked. I remember when my goal was to win my pro card after my first show. I attended a show, watched the guy that won the overall, and that was my vision for an entire year until that show. That was the best training ever, right? So I feel like getting on stage earlier is going to be great in the long run. The minimum I would say is 1 year of hard training and nutrition under your belt before you get on stage. Whenever someone reaches out to me and says, you know, I'm kind of interested in competing, what do you think? And I say, let's do a show a year from now. I want you to find a show, attend it. We're gonna do that show a year later, because I've put all the things in place that worked really well for me. And that's a lot of where my experience in coaching comes from. When I found the show that I wanted to do, I started researching coaches. I hired a coach based on the videos that he was doing, the information that he was putting out. I believed a lot in the philosophy, and I didn't feel like I was hiring a coach. I felt like I was hiring a mentor, someone that understood the sport on a different level. I felt like I was learning, and it turned out to be the case very much. Layne Norton was my first coach that I hired in 2007, and I learned a ton from him. At a time when the sport was doing all these weird things and I was reading in magazines, Layne was just cutting through all the BS, giving me a plan and explaining to me why we were doing it this way. And you know, that was a great experience for me. So this person in Instagram also asked me, what do I think about hiring a coach? Well, first things first, hiring a coach is a luxury not all of us can have, and there's a lot of great information out there, but it can be difficult to look through that information and go, what do I trust, what do I not trust? I would, without a doubt, suggest hiring a coach if it's something that fits your life, if you can afford it financially and you can find someone that you feel fits your philosophies. Don't just hire somebody in the gym. Don't just hire somebody off of a couple pictures off Instagram. Keep an eye on that person. Make sure, you know, maybe you can interact with them, direct message them, maybe, you know, ask them some questions somehow, attend a seminar, but get a feel for that person and make sure you guys are on the same page, and then you can be off and running. I feel like the right coach is like going to college and getting a master's degree in contest prep. Yes, you can go learn all the stuff that you can get from a master's program by buying the books and reading them and looking through them, but a coach is going to be able to cut through all the BS for you, and that's the real value. So yes, competing, I think you need at least a year of experience, but before you turn pro, it's probably going to take a lot longer than that. You know, depending on your genetics and your ability to add muscle and have low body fat, like these are all very important factors, but the process of getting on stage, I think the biggest factor is just getting it done. Finding a show, finding a timeline, and committing to it. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be lifting weights for a decade before you do so, okay? I think getting involved, it's going to compound in positive ways so that you start climbing the tier system. You might find out that you don't enjoy the process as much, and if you don't enjoy the process, then it's not gonna be for you anyway. The real joy in competing is not getting the trophy. The real joy is putting yourself through this process and figuring out that, man, that's what I really enjoy. So many of the competitors that I talk to, they feel like getting on stage is just an afterthought. They love just getting through the process of getting stage lean, looking amazing, feeling amazing, know that they accomplished that. And speaking from experience, it just built a ton of confidence in me going through that process. Accomplishing some goals along the way, yes, but now I just enjoy the process. And I know that about myself. So hopefully this video is helpful, guys. I know you know, it can be a tough decision deciding when to compete. And if you have any specific questions below, let me know and I'll answer them. And once again, thank you guys for the amazing direct message questions on the gram. And I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
By myself.